Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 5 o'clock here in Melbourne, and some of you are from interstate. We've got New South Wales, Queensland, and our friend James in Perth. So we're from all over the place today. So most of us are on similar time zones. I guess Perth, Brisbane are on different ones as well. Anyway, I hope the weather's doing well for you, and it's heading into the evening. So we're going to be together for the next 2 hours, and we're going to be talking about comprehensive QuickBooks Online training. So it's a deep dive into QuickBooks Online. We're going to cover off on a lot of stuff. I'm going to do a lot of talking and a lot of showing. So what I hope you guys will be also doing is asking some questions. So I pointed out a little bit early before we started where the question box is. So anything, any questions that you have would be great if you post in there. And if you haven't already, you can give me a bit of a shout out as to what state you're from, what industry your business is in, and those sort of things. So if I'm going through some things and you feel that you need some more information, then do ask the question. If I can't answer it at the time, we'll probably do a little bit of extra question time at the end of our session today at 7 o'clock. There is also a handout. You'll see that in the box under handouts on the right-hand side. So it's called Starting Out with QuickBooks Online. It is a PDF. So you'll be able to download that. I do recommend. Oh, what do you mean? No, there's no video yet, Liam. You should see the screen, the comprehensive green screen. So the PDF handout, I do think you should download that. There's some great content in there. There's also some new content that we won't be covering off today. So some areas that will affect, just what you see. So hopefully, Liam, you'll now see my face. So that's who you're talking to. My name's Diane Lucas. My business is direct management. So I'm working as a bookkeeping consultant in the bookkeeping industry. We have lots of clients down here that we train on QuickBooks and do bookkeeping and all that sort of stuff. So I've been working with Intuit for quite some time since they came to Australia, which would be late 2012, so probably one of the longest running people in working with Intuit as a bookkeeper. So there you go. What we're going to do today is obviously talk about QuickBooks Online. I'm going to break into a demo. I'm sorry, I just noticed that Rennie has asked some questions already. We're actually not going to cover off on GST today at all, but in the manual there is the how-tos of the GST Centre. So do have a look at that, and if there's other questions, then you'll have to get some other assistance. But sorry, GST Centre is not what we're covering today. We are also going to go through the mobile app, assuming that my technology works really well. You're not registered with GST? Well, that's fantastic. Then you don't have to worry about GST. Okay, we've got a chatty group today. I don't normally get all this. Okay, so connecting to your communities. There's 3 different ways there. If you're under social media, then encourage you to get on board and engage. You can always get some help in those sorts of things there as well. Okay, let's get into our training. I think it's going to be a fun session today. I like it when people engage with me, otherwise it gets a bit boring. All right, so I'm going to just flick over to a new screen, so just give it a chance to catch up. Alrighty, so this is the intuit.com.au website. So this is a sort of starting ground. You're probably familiar with that if you've already signed up to QuickBooks Online. If you're thinking about signing up, you haven't done so yet, then this is where you would do that. So what I want to show you from here are some great tools. Okay, so under small business, you've got these bits and pieces that you can check out. Here's a good one: find an advisor. Okay, so Rennie, if you're sort of got queries around your GST still, and you really don't know where to go for assistance, jump into find an advisor. We're all on there. You can search by postcode, get someone near you. Otherwise, as I said, I'm based in Melbourne. If you search, actually, I don't think I come up in Melbourne because I'm actually outside Melbourne. But anyway, you can find someone in that area, no problem at all. Okay, what I want to show you is the signing in. So a lot of people, when they sign in, they use, they come to this screen, they click on sign in, and then they go to QuickBooks Online. So that sort of gives me the error. It's because it's a bit of a long-winded way of going. So when you click on click sign in, and then QuickBooks Online, sign in, and I'm already signed in. That sort of defeats the purpose. Let me just sign out for a sec, go back. All right, back to the start. Alrighty, so we go sign in and then QuickBooks Online. It takes us to our sign in screen here. So this, this is where we really want to start from when we're signing up with QuickBooks signing into QuickBooks Online. So I bookmark that sign in. So if you're not familiar with the concept of bookmarking a page, then in Chrome, which is the preferred browser for QuickBooks Online, it's in the top right-hand corner. And you can see this one's already bookmarked because the bookmark star is blue. If this wasn't bookmarked, then it would be white, and then we'd just bookmark it. So if you don't know what a bookmarking is, it sticks it in this top bar here. Okay, so I've got 2 bookmarks bookmarked. Try saying that twice, 10 times fast. And then we're going to actually build up here. I'm going to show you how to use these bookmarks to sort of drive some efficiencies in when you're using QuickBooks. If you can't see your bookmarks bar, these 3 little dotty things in the top corner are your settings for Chrome. So you go to bookmarks and then put a tick next to show bookmarks bar. All right, so if I untick that, my bookmarks disappear. Simply put a tick back there and my bookmarks are back in place. All right, so let's log into our file. So what we're going to talk about first is what we're going to do with setting up a file. So some of you are already users, so you're probably going to get some tips as to what sort of things to look for. Some of you are, fledglings just beginning on your journey of QuickBooks, so you're going to learn quite a bit more about the setup. So it's really important to get the setup of the file right before you actually sort of embark upon the journey of doing your bookkeeping, because everything, as you should know, is the one that if things are set up properly, then it all works nicely. How do I correct the one I set up wrong? Geez, that's a good question. It depends on how far wrong it's been. There's lots of ways of setting it up. So Haping, you're probably the best person to go to find a pro advisor to help you, because I can't really address your question or your situation in this webinar. Okay, so overview of this interface. So what we're looking at now is the dashboard. The dashboard, we've got different centers on the the left-hand side. So our centers are where we can do stuff, okay, where we can see what's going on in the file. And we'll cover off on a few of those as we go across. The top of the line here, we've got this great hamburger icon. Watch what happens when I click on it. Okay, it shrinks down my screen. So if I'm working on a screen where there's a bit of limited space, you think about some screens are a bit smaller than the one I'm showing you today, that actually works quite well. That gives you a bit of more retail space. That's the name of my business. And we keep moving across the top of the black bar. We've got these 4 icons on the top right-hand corner. So the plus sign, if you think about plus as adding, well, plus, we're adding things to the file, okay? So what we do when we add things is we're entering transactions. So you can see here all our things are grouped under the headings. Customers, so these are the transactional activities we can do that relate to customer activities. We've got suppliers, all the different activities relating to suppliers, employees, and then our other group. Okay, so we can add things from there. Our magnifying glass is where we search for stuff. So we can do a search transaction. Okay, so we can enter in, we can search by description, we can search by an invoice number, we can search by a dollar amount, and we can also do an advanced search. So I'm going to actually open that one up in a new link. So I just did a right click and open a new link because I want to show you what that one looks like, because it's a really important one. So we can do searches on all sorts of things, all transactions. We can filter for transactions, and my favorite is to actually do searches by dollar value. You'd be surprised at how many times you actually want to find something, and if you just do a quick search by dollar, then you'll find it a lot easier than any other way. So this search is a really, really beneficial thing, so I'm going to actually save it to my bookmarks bar. So top right-hand corner, my star, its name is search, happily done. Okay, so what I've created now is a new button for search. That when I close down that tab, if I open up a brand new clean tab and I click on search, it's going to open up search for me. So now I've got 2 tabs open. I've got my home screen and I've got a separate search tab open simply by clicking on my shortcut that I created, my bookmark. Okay. So the other thing on this magnifying glass, not only is it the great search function, but we can also see our most recent transactions. So this is really useful when you've saved something. So say, for example, you've saved an invoice and you go, oh damn it, I forgot to add in a line of whatever it is. So you just very quickly go to the magnifying glass, and there's the invoice you last entered sitting there at the top. And so you just click in it, make your changes, and then save it again. So very easy to find things. So the gear icon is the third one across, and then we've got our help button on the very last one there. So we're going to spend a bit of time on the gear icon now, because we're going to talk about the different things to do with accounts and settings. There's a few other things we'll also cover off in here. So just quickly, the audit log. The audit log is something that tracks who does what and who's deleted things, who's added things, who's made changes, all that sort of stuff. So you can always find out those sort of information underneath the audit log. So when you first get into your file, the accounts and settings, it's really important to make sure that things are turned on appropriately or turned off, as the case may be, depending on what version you've subscribed to. So there's three versions of QuickBooks. You've got the Simple Start, you've got the Essentials, and you've got the Plus version. So each one, of course, has different levels. So if we look at intuit.com.au, go back to that website we first looked at. If you're not exactly sure which one you need to be selecting, if you haven't bought it already, here's the matrix of all the different bits and pieces that you can then purchase the right ones to your business. So once we've got the file set up, there's certain things you need to do. You need to add in your company details. So you've got the legal name. So say, for example, my legal name might be the trustee for Diane Lucas, something like that. Okay, but otherwise, if you're just a normal operating business, or this is your trading name, for a sole trader, you might put the legal name as your personal name as opposed to the trading name of your business. And of course, the ABN as well. Company type, don't be too stressed about this one. It's really not going to do anything in the file. Just select what you think is right. Contact info is critical. This is really important. If you've got more than one email address, so the one that you've got, if you've got the one email address to your business, then you would put it the same as a company email. In this case here, I'm showing you that we've got a company email address and then a separate email address that directs to our sales area for our invoices. So when we create an invoice, this is the email that will actually save on the invoice and not the info at my business one. Okay, so that's the customer facing email. The same thing with our addresses. Okay, we've got a company address and then we've got a customer facing address. So if you're working from home, for example, you probably don't want to disclose your personal residence address. So if you don't have a PO box at all, then when you're doing your invoice template, I'd probably suggest that you don't include an address. Okay, so that's the sort of details you can put in there. Okay. Yes, you can correct the one that you've got set up now. All depends on how bad it is and what can be fixed, and also if it's worth the time and effort to fix it, because it may be more economical to start from scratch. So without knowing anything about your business or about your file, that's my broad-based answer. Okay. Back to our company settings. Customize. So we can customize our invoice, which we'll look at later. We can do it from this screen here. We can also do it from another area as well. Preferred invoice terms. If you've got a business that has specific terms on a regular basis, so say for example mine is net 15 or net 14, then this is where you'd set it. If you've got varying invoice terms depending on the customer, but you've got a typical sort of standard one, you can set the preferred terms here, and then you can customize the background of that particular card. So you might have a customer that you say, okay, well, this guy is 30 days end of month. So in the customer card, you would specifically change it against that customer rather than broadly changing it across the whole company file. You've got all these in the Plus version. You've got different add-ins that you can do here, that you can do different bits and pieces to do with the invoicing. So depending on which version you're on, you'll see different levels of detail here. What you will all see is this custom fields, which is blank by default. So the custom field is where you can capture some additional information when you're raising an invoice. So, for example, the purchase order, you might have a customer that says every time you invoice me, you must relate back to you must relate back to actually a purchase order number. You might be in the building industry and they want to refer back to the name of the person who was on site at the time or whatever. This one here, custom transaction numbers, by default is unticked. I do recommend that you do tick it. This is the invoice numbering. So when you have that ticked, you'll actually be able to see the invoice number on the invoice that you're generating. And of course, it's always going to print there, but you don't actually see it on the screen when you're creating an invoice unless this one's ticked. All right, so make sure that one's ticked. Products and services. Inventory is only for plus versions. So you need to be able to, if you don't do inventory, then you make sure this one is unticked. So inventory is about tracking stock. So just because you hold stock or you hold some inventory doesn't mean you need to be tracking inventory. So if you don't understand what inventory actually means or whether you should or shouldn't be tracking it, then do ask the guidance of someone who can help you. My experience is that small business owners probably track inventory more often than they should be, and inventory can cause a whole host of problems. So before engaging on an inventory pathway, just make sure that you're doing the right thing. Okay, SKU, stock keeping unit column. This is all about being able to add in like a product code. So if you've got a barcode or a customer a supplier reference number or something like that, then you can display those. Bit of other tweaking you can do to your file. This is this messages area. I definitely recommend that you customize the email message that's going out with your invoices to be more indicative of your business. This is the default text. Here's your invoice. We appreciate your prompt payment. Thanks to your business. I don't know. I'd personalize it a bit more, make it a bit more user-friendly for your own business. You can also change depending on the type of sales form you're using. So you can have different wording for all the different sales form types. That's all I want to cover off on that. Expenses. Okay, in the plus version, again, we have the ability to mark things as billable. We can also on-charge those billable expenses to a customer, and we can also mark up those items as well. So this is something that you may or may not be aware of. So an example of that might be I'm buying some stuff in for a customer, and then I want to on-charge that directly to the customer. So if that's the case, then I might want to make it billable, and then I also might want to mark it up. So be aware that a markup is across the board. If I set that markup at 20%, it's going to mark up all my items, billable items at 20%. And if I wanted to do a higher or lesser markup, I'd have to manually override those. Okay, so again, this is an area of sort of expertise, I guess, that might need a little bit of help on. Purchase orders is turned on if you're doing inventory. If you're not doing an inventory, you can, as an option, turn purchase order on. Purchase order is in the plus version also. So is used to send off to a supplier in order to send you some goods. For those of you in the construction industry, and there's a couple online, I believe, the taxable payments annual report is something that will be of interest to you. So this is the reporting function or requirement that you need to do at the end of each financial year to the Australian Taxation Office. That's to do with your contractors. So if you're engaging contractors to help you in your construction industry work, then you'll need to be turned on for TPAR, and then each relevant contractor supplier will also need to be ticked on for TPAR, so then you can generate a TPAR report at the end of each financial year. If there's any cleaners on this session today, then the cleaning industry will also be engaging in a TPAR process as of the 1st of July 2018, so only a few months away. So you too will need to be turning on your file for TPAR. Advanced section on the bottom of our settings area. Okay, so this is where we sort of do some final tweaks and configurations. For our typical financial year, ours starts from July 1. There are businesses in Australia, there might be a non-for-profit, might be some sports leagues, that sort of thing. They have a financial year starting in April or sometimes in October or whatever it might be. So it's very easy to use this file to actually configure the financial year according to what your particular entity does. The accounting method here is about how you do your reporting, as in running a report, like a profit and loss report. It's not about how you report your BAS. Okay, so BAS reporting is not accounting method. So the BAS report, if you're running on a cash basis for BAS, you can still run an accrual method financial report. Okay. Closing the books, if you want to lock the file down. So when you're finished a financial year or finished a reporting month or whatever it might be, you can set a closing date. Let's say March 31st being the end of a quarter, and we can set a password on there also if we want to do that. So all our bookkeeping clients, we all lock their files, and our clients know not to touch anything in closed off periods, otherwise they'll be held to pay. Okay, default tax rate selection. This is, if you think about this one as being relating to how you invoice. So for example, if your invoicing line is $1,000 plus GST, so your invoice line is $1,000, but your invoice total is $1,100, so $1,000 plus $100 GST, then you're invoicing on an exclusive of tax basis. If your line item is $1,100 for a total of $1,100, then you would be on an inclusive of tax basis. Okay, so be aware of the differences between those two and how your business operates, and make the correct selection. Now this one here, out of scope of GST. If you're not registered for GST and you've accidentally turned the file on for GST, then you'll need to make the out of scope of selection of GST, and that actually prevents a GST selection, by default. So that works out nicely. Okay, so that's the way you can turn things on and off in the way of GST. So if you're a business that's in transition, you're moving from GST free to GST registered, as you've you started to increase your sales, which is fantastic, then you can turn the GST on, use this out of scope, and then at the magic day you can flip the switch to being either inclusive or exclusive. Okay, chart of accounts. If you like account numbers, you can turn that on. Otherwise, you can just leave it off. It's neither here nor there. It's really up to you. I prefer not to have account numbers on. It just, it's just in a QuickBooks environment. Everything's driven by alpha or number or whatever. It's not determining things. But if you want to reorder or order things by number, then by all means put account numbers on. Some accountants like them and only want them turned on, and other businesses don't want it either. So it's really up to you on that area. Okay, categories. This is in the Plus version also. So this is another way of categorizing your transactions. So what that means is we can actually assign different groupings. So if you've got an organisation where you've got different departments, so you might have an administrative department, a warehouse, you've got reps on the road, things like that, you might want to track those by class. So if you're making purchases, say you've gone to Officeworks and you've spent $500, you've bought goods, office stuff, stationery for everyone. You might say, okay, out of that $500, I bought $100 for the reps on the road, I've spent $200 for the warehouse, and I spent $200 for the admin department, and you can break it down that way. So that's an example of a class. Another example would be a business that has trucks, for example. So they've got a fleet of trucks, trucks and trailers. They want to track the profitability of those trucks. So then they could then assign all of their costs, so their fuel costs, their repair costs, all of those things relevant to the particular truck that has accrued that cost. And they could also raise invoices assigning the invoice against the class as well. So then they can run a profit and loss on a particular truck and see how profitable that truck is. So a location is another way, again, it's of defining a categorization. So thinking about our class of different departments, a location might be that we have multiple warehouses. So we might have a warehouse here in Melbourne, we might have one in country Victoria, and we might have one in Sydney or something like that. So then we want to be able to track different bits and pieces, so we might use locations for that. I use locations in classes a lot for property development and property sort of portfolios, investment portfolios. So our location would be the property address and the class would be the stage of development. So like the pre-construction phase, we're getting all your permits and planning in place, and then a construction phase, and then a rental phase. So there'd be my three classes, and then the locations is tracking the addresses of those particular properties. So really, this area of classes and locations, as I said, it's in the plus version. It's determined by what you want to achieve in your reporting. Okay, so if you're not sure how to set those sort of things up, then really think about, you know, what you want to see, and then it'll sort of fall into place as to what you should have turned on. Automation is QuickBooks' way of helping you. Sometimes automation can be a bit of a pain. So you'll find if you haven't tweaked this area at all that you'll have automatically apply credits with a tick on it. That is by default. My recommendation is to turn that one off. So if you're raising an adjustment note for your customers, the adjustment note applies to an invoice. If you have automatically apply credits ticked, then that adjustment note will automatically apply to an invoice and not necessarily the particular invoice that you wanted it to apply to. So if you want to have control about where your adjustment notes are positioned, against which invoices they apply to, then make sure you untick automatically apply credits. Projects is a new section in QuickBooks. It is in the little handout that you can download. If you don't know where the handout is, then put your hand, or put it in the question box. But I've been pointed out it's under the handout section on the right-hand side, and so that goes into a little bit more detail there. Time tracking is in the Essentials and Plus version. So if you want to track time, then you can do that. It does push through into the payroll section. You can also track contracted time, and then you can also pull that time through into your customer invoicing as well if you wanted to do that. Multi-currency is in Essentials and Plus, so if you have a need to do multi-currency tracking or turn on, if you've got foreign currency bank accounts, those sort of things, or you have a need to actually raise invoices in foreign currency, then you can turn that on here. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the company settings, some things to look out for. The next thing you really want to look at is the chart of accounts. So the chart of accounts is what I call the backbone of your organisation, the backbone of your business. So the chart of accounts can be found under the accounting dashboard on the left-hand side. And if we go to the chart of accounts tab, you'll see what I mean by it being a backbone. Okay, so what this is here is capturing all of the activity happening in your business. So it captures your income, it captures your expenses, and it tracks how profitable you are. It tracks, what your net worth is. So the worth is about your assets. It tracks who you owe, so your liabilities. So all of these are in here. So if you don't understand what the chart of accounts is, then definitely you need to get some help, because a great chart of accounts is what will help you understand what's happening in your business. So the QuickBooks Online comes with a standard set of accounts, and it does need a little bit of tweaking as well. So it's very easy to add in a new account. So say there's, out of the account that you've got, there's something that's missing, you think, then you can add that in. So as you scroll down here, you can see I've got all sorts of different expenses. And what I've now got set up, for example, is I've got a point of sale machine, so I've got merchant fees happening on my bank statement. So I want to add a new expense for merchant fees. So I'm selecting the account type. The account type is the type of account we're setting up. So in this case, I'm setting up an expense, and my expense is going to be like a bank charge. So this detailed type is where people get a little bit confused. There's so many to choose from that they don't know what to choose. So my rule of thumb is choose the one of best fit. Okay, so I'm doing a merchant fee. So a merchant fee is a type of bank charge. So I can then now change that name to merchant fee, and it has a GST code on it. Okay, so that's how I can add a new account in. I can also remove accounts. I can delete them. So say, for example, here I've got inventory asset, which is my standard inventory account, but I've also got a stock on hand account here, which is another way of calling it inventory asset, but this one's not being used at all. So I can delete that. So if I go across to the right-hand side and drop down the little arrow, I've got the option here to delete. So in QuickBooks, in the chart of accounts, even though it says delete here, it doesn't remove it. It's only making it hidden. It's making it inactive. So for all of our lists, when you say delete, it's actually just hiding it, making it inactive. So how do we look at, how do we find those deleted things, okay? So if we look at the top right here, just under new, there's another little gear icon here. So this is a settings, another settings button. So on each page, you'll see one of these gear icons. It's a settings button specifically for the page that we're working on. So we're working on the chart of accounts. So this settings button relates to this chart of accounts. So you can see here, I've got include inactive. So if I tick that one, it's now going to show me my inactive or my deleted accounts. And you can see here, here's my stock on hand with deleted in brackets. And as we go back over to the right, it says make active. So all I need to do is click on make active, and I've restored that file back to its normal previous deleted state. And now I'm going to unshow the inactive accounts by unticking that one again. Okay, so I've deleted it. I've now and I've made it inactive, and now I've just made it active again. I can also make sub accounts of my grouping, so I can group things together. So say, for example, my payroll liabilities. So I have withholding tax in my payroll, and I've also got super in my as my liability and as a payroll liability. So I've grouped those two together under the heading of payroll liabilities. So if you want to do groupings like this, you need to create the header account, and then you then make the other one sub account. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So you can see here, my withholding tax is a sub account of my payroll liabilities. Okay, so I've placed a tick here to say is a sub account against my payroll liabilities account. So you can see as we scroll down, I've grouped a few other ones. I've grouped my motor vehicle expenses. I've grouped my payroll expenses. Okay, so when I do reporting, I can shrink that payroll to just show the general overall, or I can expand that out to show each line specifically as well. Okay, so that's the chart of accounts. Then the next thing we want to do in setting up is GST. In this particular file, it's already turned on. So our GST center. Now, for those of you who are just brand new into a QuickBooks Online file, the GST Center will have a different view to this. Again, that's in the updated manual that you can download, and the functionality is slightly has been enhanced as well. But meanwhile, what I want to show you is under the settings area when you're turning on GST, or if you have it already, that you want to make sure that there's a couple of things done. And one of those is to make sure that this file is set to the GST method here reflects what you do for BAS. Okay, so when you turn GST on, by default, it probably will pop to accruals, and you want to make sure that if you're reporting for BAS on a cash basis, that you select cash. So then the last thing in our setup we want to do is we want to make sure that we invite in our users. So clicking on the gear icon again, under your company, I've got manage users. So the users are the people that will be accessing the file. So what we can do here is, depending on which version you're on, whether it's Simple Start, Essentials or Plus, will determine the number of users you can invite in. So a Simple Start will just be yourself as master admin. Essentials will allow you to invite 2 others, and Plus will allow you to invite 4 others. You've also got an accountant tab across the top here. So the accountant tab is the accountant and bookkeeper typically that you'd be inviting into your file. So regardless of which version you've got, you can invite up to 2 accountant users there. So if you're going to invite your accountant in, do invite them in as an accountant user and not as a regular user. Okay. That's pretty much covers it for the setup. So the next thing we want to do is we want to talk about very quickly the overview of the banking area. So the banking area in our online program, QuickBooks Online, is one of the key efficiencies of using an online software, because what happens is we can connect up our bank account to the QuickBooks Online, and so our bank talks to QuickBooks and pulls through the transactions into QuickBooks, and we can do a lot of the coding and things directly in the banking sector. So how do you connect up a bank account? From the dashboard screen here, we can click on down the bottom where it says Connect Accounts, which takes us to where we make a selection. Which, you know, if your bank's not there, you might have the Bank of Melbourne. So we, you know, just typed in Melbourne and it's brought up the 2 different options there, so I can then select one of those. So what you do then is you're then putting in your online banking details in order to connect the 2 together. Okay, so that's how you would connect up an account. So if you've got an account to connect up, it will pull through 90 days of transactions. There is an option, once I've put in my banking online details, my next screen gives me an option to download less days than 90 days. It's also very easy to overlook that one. So if I wanted to bring through less than 90 days and I accidentally didn't see that option, then it's not the end of the world, and I'll show you how to delete transactions from your banking screen if you need to. If you're starting up a file from a period based, you know, going back, so like the 1st of July, and we're now in April, so near the end of the 4th month. So if we were to connect up our bank feeds now, we're probably going to get in transactions from maybe the end of October onwards. So if we're doing a file from the 1st of July, then we've got another option as well. So just let me click into the banking area and ignore the bits all over here. I want you to focus on this top right-hand corner where we've got the option here to file upload. So if I wanted to bring in a file of transactions from my online banking software, so if I've logged on to my bank and I want to bring in transactions from the 1st of July through to whatever date my bank feed stopped at, I can click on File Upload and I can import a file from my banking software. So what I mean by what I'm sort of describing here is you can create a file from the 1st of July, even though today is the 26th of April. So you would connect up your bank feeds, and then you would also import in the missing dates in a manual file, and then you can code them all that way. So when we go through our banking section in just over half an hour or so, all of the things I've brought through here I've actually imported as opposed to have a real bank account connected. Okay, so I've just seen a question there from Zara. Can you remove the option to pay by PayPal on invoices? Yes, you can. You can untick each one. If you know, so you've got specific ones ticked for PayPal invoicing, and then you just untick the ones you don't. If you want to undo it all together, then you'd need to go into your apps area here on the bottom left-hand corner and then disconnect PayPal. Okay, so going now onto our customer invoicing. So under our sales center, we've got 4 tabs. We've got the all sales, invoices, customers, products and services. So our all sales and invoices is all about the how and the when. And our customers is the who, and our products and services are the what. So if we're starting off in our file, the first couple of things we want to do is we want to actually configure the what. What are we actually selling? And before we do that as well, we also want to customize our invoice template. So let's have a look at configuring the products and services. So the products and services are the things we sell, and we sell things differently. So we've got options of service items. So these are the things that we provide a service on. So it's our labour, for example. And we also have products that we sell, and those products may or may not be represented as inventory. So as I said earlier, inventory is in the plus version only, and if you do have stock or things, tangible items that you sell, you don't have to track those as inventory. You could track them as non-inventory. So the example here, for example, nuts and bolts used in an installation. Some organisations attempt to count all of those, but it's almost, it's just quite a challenge to do that. So that would be something that you'd sort of just wouldn't do in the way of tracking. So large ticket items, like an air conditioner unit, well, yes, you might want to track that as inventory, because if that walked out of your warehouse, then you would want to account for it. So you've also got the fourth option here, bundling. This is where we can group things together. So an example is I'm a pet store and I've got a new puppy kit. So my new puppy kit consists of a bed, a toy, a lead, some food, some flea ointment, and then I can sell it all together at a fixed price. Whereas if the customer were to buy each of those individually, it would probably cost them more. So I'm doing a bundle of select items and selling them at a particular rate. So bundling is a nice option that you can do there. So the next thing is your grouping. Okay, so when you sell things, you may want to group them. And a grouping in QuickBooks is called a category. So you can see here I've got a grouping heading called accessory, and I'm selling some gold spangles. And thinking of the nuts and bolts gold spangles, there's so many of them that I'm not going to count the little things, so that's a non-inventory item. And if we scroll down here, I've got some other groupings. I've got handbags, and I've got different types of handbags. I've got a clutch purse and an evening bag. And then underneath my evening bag, I've broken it down even further to a glam bag. And then my glam bags come under colour coding, so they're gold and silver. So you can see that each of these is sort of stepped down. So I call this basically the tree of inventory, where I'm thinking about, what my heading group is, what's the first thing that I'm selling, and that's the trunk of the tree. And then each different step down that I'm going becomes another, smaller area on the tree, until finally what I'm selling is the leaf on the end of my twig. Okay, so these bold items here are what we call our categories, and then what I'm selling is actually my stock item or my item. So you can see how this works here with our shoes as well. We've got women's shoes, evening shoes, stiletto shoes. I've also got sports shoes, and that's it. So how do we set up our categories? Top right-hand corner, so you're probably getting a feel now. The top right-hand corner is where we're doing all new stuff. And then we've got more, where we can manage categories. Okay, so we can set up our categories. So we can do a new category, and then we can say it's a subcategory of, and we can point it to the right place. Okay, so this is where we set up our groupings. Back to our products and services. Okay, so if we just do a new one, if we click on service, for example, you can see here where we assign the category. Okay, so we can select the category, which automatically then creates it into a group. I can also do bulk coding. So say my 12-inch pole here, I can also edit that, or I can edit while clicking in it. Sorry, I need to tick a couple more. Let's see, what else can I tick? Consultancy, I don't know, I've got two there. So I've got batch actions here. Sorry, assign category. Okay, so I've ticked 2, and I could assign a category of those in this area here. So by ticking more than one, I can do some bulk actions. I can also filter in my area here, so I can say just show me all of the inventory items. Okay, so then I can, you know, this is where I can do stock take. I can tick them all. I can say batch action, adjust quantity. Okay, so take some time to have a good look at what this area can do. So once you've got all that sort of set up, then once you've got all that set up, then the next thing we want to do is look at our custom form styles. Okay, James, you've got a question there. Can these be brought in as a CSV file? I'm assuming you mean import in your product items. Yeah, you can. Okay, so you can import it in here. You can also, under our gear icon, you've got import data. So let's just click on that. And so we can say products and services. And what I would recommend is that you download a sample file. So this is where it's mapped against this sample file. So it's not necessarily a CSV, but as an Excel. So what you do is you'd open up your CSV file, you would map the corresponding columns against your sample file. Okay, so let's have a look at our custom form styles. So by default, you've got the standard master one here. So this is the one that covers off on everything, unless you then also want to add in some new styles. So you can see here, I've added a new style in the form of a quote, but I've actually called it a sales order. So this is a way of getting around a sales order, or I should say a lack of there being a sales order in the system. Okay, so let's have a look at our invoice template. So what's really cool with the template is you can make all sorts of different configurations here. If you want to use lots of ink, do that one. Friendly, that's not too bad. I mean, for me, my favorites are either friendly or airy. The other ones look a bit sort of blah. But anyway, that's my opinion. What I do like about this is you can actually customize the branding of the invoice to suit your logo. So if you've got a logo in there, then you can actually just click on the color and it will change the color of the invoice template. I'm just trying to pick up some black here. There you go. Some gray and back to red. Okay, so if you want to do some really cool branding, then pick the color out of your invoice. So my branding is orange, so there's lots of orange on my invoice. With regard to the content, so you've got, you can just click into the fields here and you can add or remove bits and pieces. So I mentioned earlier, if you're a sole trader and you don't want to add your address, then just make sure it's unticked if you're working from home or whatever, so you don't have to have it there. If you're finding that your ABN number is duplicating, untick that one, because even though it's unticked there, which you should have in your company settings, the ABN number, it will bring it through into the invoice anyway. That's just a little glitch in the system. So if you're finding you've got a duplicated ABN, untick it on your invoice template, but leave it listed in your company settings. What else we've got on there? Bits and pieces. So yeah, you just pretty much play, it'll add things in. If we've got our customer fields, then they'll display across the top here. Okay, these are the most important bits, really. This is where you're going to show what you've sold. So you want to, make sure that you've got a number of, you're showing what you need to show, basically. If you don't need to show date, then don't put it in there. Untick it. Okay. Tax, I always untick and take it out, because it's not actually a dollar quantity of tax, it's the GST code. And it just, I don't know, it can look quite messy. So I just figure, well, it's pretty obvious down the bottom here, you've got your GST, and I've never had anyone complain when the GST column has been removed. You've also got the options of adding in, different areas. So you've got your product and service and, category. So you can really start playing with these sort of things here. If you've got your product and service and you've got your description listed in your product and service, usually tend to go with description. So what I mean by that, I'll go back and show you, just open up a new tab. While it's bringing it up, I'll keep going here. So you can also then make the widths bigger. Okay, so what we want to do is have as much room to write as much text in our activity as we want, as we can. And so I would sort of tend to move the other things around and shrink them down that way, which gives me more room to give more descriptions. Okay, so if I'm, like my work, I do lots of description. If you just got a standard description like, fit out or whatever it might be, then it's not really, that important. But yeah, you can play with the different column widths there quite nicely. So what I was going to show you is just going back to our products and services. So if I add in a new, so say let's do what I just said. So my type might be, fit out. What I want to do is I want to make sure that in this description here, I'm also including those words because I don't want to have to type that when I'm creating the invoice. Okay, so I'm always filling out as much detail in here. So what I say to my tradie clients, for example, what are the words you're consistently typing when you're creating an invoice? Because we don't want you to have to type those ever again. So if you always, write, I'm kind of gone blank now, but if you're always using the same sort of words in your particular thing that you're selling, then type it once in here, and then every time you create an invoice, it's going to come through. So you can see here my sales description. Okay, we've got silver clutch purse, long gold strap evening bag, whatever it might be. Alrighty. Okay, so to create a new style, click on new style, and you can select the different templates there. So that when you're actually creating an invoice, if we just go new invoice, down the very bottom where it says customize, if we pop that up, we can actually see that we can create a new style. So the better example, because this is actually a quote as our style, if I go to our plus sign and click on new quote, I'll actually have the ability to change my quote. So customize down the bottom, it's defaulted to standard, but I could actually make that sales order and then it will do the template of my sales order form. Okay, so let's have a look at our sales center. All right, so the first thing we can see here is what we call the money bar. So our money bar is tracking what's happening in our business. So then we can say, okay, we've got a quote happening here, we have some unbilled activity, and we've got some overdue invoices, and we've been paid a little bit in the last month as well. So with each of these, you can see as I click on, touch them, they're bouncing up, which means I can click into them. So I can drill down and I can see what that activity behind it is. So here's my quote for another satisfied customer. I could open that quote and look at it, and I could also start an invoice from here. Okay, so it's giving me that next action to do. So with our plus sign, remember our plus sign is about adding. Okay, so we can add things from here. So we could have generated a quote at this point. We could generate an invoice from here, but we can also do an invoice from this screen. So if we go back to all of our customers, and I clicked on another satisfied customer, you could see here our next action is create invoice. And if I click into that customer, we can see the different transactions that have happened in the past. And I can edit details here and those sort of things. So they've got 3 different options there to have a look at. We're not looking at projects today though. So our transaction list is also showing our quote. So there's our create invoice yet again. Okay, so lots of places that we can do things from. And then on the top there, we've got our new again. So we can do new transaction. And then we can select different transactions. Sorry, Kuma, where was the custom style button for invoice templates. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Custom form style. Oh, I probably just went too fast, did you? Gear icon, custom form styles. Is that, am I pointing to the right thing for you? Cool. Yeah, goody. Okay. All right. Back. All right. So let's have a look at our quote, because quotes are really cool. All right. So what we've got with our quote, actually, I'm going to show you something else that you need to do, because this popped up with the client that I was with just before I had to get on here, actually. In our automation, so our advanced, remember our automation is QuickBooks helping things. If you're doing quotes, make sure this one's ticked, copy quotes to invoices, because I just don't understand why you would have a quote but not want to convert it to an invoice. So the client I was working on had that one unticked. So when I went to look at the quote, I'm like, oh, okay, the convert to invoice button isn't there, and I, switched it on in here, and sure enough, we can convert to invoice. So yeah, just not 100% sure why you would not actually have that one turned on and why that wouldn't be a default anyway. So make sure that one's turned on, because when you've got a quote, you can then create the invoice from here. Okay, and the other beauty thing with a quote too is you can also copy to a purchase order. So say you are tracking in stock, or you whatever it might be, you need to, if you're looking at our quantities here, for example, our evening bags, we've got we're selling 2, we've got 4 on hand. Women's shoes, I'm selling 2, I've got 6 on hand. So I'm not too fussed, I don't need to order any in, but if I did, I could then easily convert this to a purchase order and send that directly off to my supplier. The other thing to look out for is the quote status over on the left-hand side, so I can actually, if I've lost that business, I can click on rejected and finalize it that way. So what I say as a rule of thumb, if we go back to my money bar here, if I see a lot of quotes sitting here, I usually ask the customer what's going on. Don't you win any business, or don't you know how to convert a quote to an invoice? And so we generally go through and close off some really old quotes. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions coming through. You are a chatty bunch today. This is pretty cool. Okay, let me just address what we got here. You can use hex code colors if your color isn't there between. I assume that means for invoice customization, so that's good. Okay, thanks, James. What else we got? With the products and services tab, are products automatically imported from any LinkedIn point of sales app? If you've actually configured that to be the case, then yes, it would be. So if you've linked your point of sale system, then you probably get an option to push that through to QuickBooks. It all depends on what your actual mapping configurations and things are in regards to your point of sale connection. So another rule of thumb that I sort of live by too is just because an app can connect to QuickBooks doesn't mean it necessarily should. It all depends on what it brings through and if it's actually going to enhance your accounting bookkeeping experience. Sometimes these apps can actually make things a little bit more challenging. Is it possible to change quantity to days or something like that? Yes, it is. So this is for our invoice templating. Again, so if we go back here, go into here, where is it? Design. Actually, we used to be able to. Ooh. Hang on, edit labels. Here we go. There we go. So once you click on edit labels and widths, this is where you change the labeling. Okay, what else have we got? What does closed on the quote mean? Oh, okay. Okay. So if you've got a quote, okay, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to convert this quote to an invoice, and that'll demonstrate what closed means. Okay, so I've forgotten that I've actually got a quote here for another satisfied customer. So I'm going to use my plus sign because I've just supplied my customer with the goods, and I'm going to say, let me just raise the invoice for my customer. And QuickBooks, nice and friendly and all, says, hey, on the right-hand side here, it pops open what we call a drawer. And this drawer is a bit of a flag. It's sort of saying, hey, look, you know, there's a quote open in the system here for what you're actually, you know, you're raising an invoice to this customer. Are you raising a separate invoice, or is this the quote that you actually want to convert? And I'll go, oh, silly me, I forgot I had a quote there. Let me add that to the invoice. Okay, so I've clicked on add. It's now populated my invoice with all the details of my quote. I can now add things to it if I want to, and I can save that, and then I can email it off and do those sort of things. So if I now go back to my customer center and I look at my another satisfied customer, I look at my quote that we've just now converted to an invoice, you'll see here that my status is closed. Okay, so it's closed because it's been converted to an invoice, and you can also see that status in this column here. All right, so if you're not converting a quote to an invoice, you've actually lost that business, then that's where you would make that status rejected. Okay, so we've saved our invoice. So we can, as I said, we can make some edits. So if I've closed that one off, I've emailed it off or whatever, I remember my magnifying glass. Okay, there's my invoice, and I can say, oops, I forgot to add something in, so I can recall that. I can make my necessary changes, and then I can save that and send it off again. So down the bottom right-hand corner, I've got the save option. So if I'm doing a lot of if I've got a lot of detail in my invoice, I probably want to periodically save. Okay, saving just saves what's on the screen. It doesn't close it down, because there's nothing worse than putting a lot of time into writing some descriptions or creating a big long invoice and then having the internet die on you through a thunderstorm or something. All right, so periodically save if you're doing a big job. Then you've got the save and close option, and with a little drop down here, I can save and new, save and send, all those other bits and pieces there as well. So let's have a look at some of the other bits at the bottom here. Down the very bottom of the screen, we've got print preview. So I can print preview that. I can print from the print. Okay, nice green button on the bottom. Print option at the top here. All sorts of different ways of printing that I can, if I wanted to. Preferably, we want to email stuff because we don't want to print stuff anymore. Can you set it to auto save on a regular basis? No. Hitting save every now and again. Oh, well, okay. Things save when you close down, when you finish a transaction and you save, it's going to save it obviously because you're hitting save. There is no auto save. It won't have a draft version of a save, if that's what you're sort of getting at, Liam. So my suggestion is it's not hard to click on save. All right, so save, just click on save, done, and then you know it's saved. Okay, we can customize, we talked about that. More is the next one I want to talk to you about. Okay, so more is where we can make a copy. So if we've got an invoice that we're going to do something very similar, we can make a copy of it. We can then make edits. Now, if you've got an invoice that you've got to make a change to, for example, then I would suggest that you're doing an adjustment note, not a delete or a void. So deleting is if you've really sort of messed something up and you want to, remove it. Okay, so just be very cautious about delete because delete is an invoice. When you delete an invoice, it's gone. Okay, it's not made inactive; it is actually gone. And if you're deleting something from a closed period, like a last financial year or a BAS period that's already finished, then you're actually going to mess things up. And your bookkeeper and accountant aren't going to be very happy with you. So be very cautious about deleting, and if you don't think that you should be deleting something, then perhaps, or you're not sure if you should be, then perhaps ask the question first. Void is where you would, keep the invoice number, but all the values behind that invoice turn to 0. Okay, so the same thing with voiding. You know, if you're voiding something from a prior financial year, you're still affecting the value of the financials. So again, err on the side of caution. Okay, so how do you do an adjustment note? So what have we got here? We've got evening shoe. Okay, so an adjustment note under our plus sign. Okay, our customer listing here, we've got an adjustment note. So what we can say is we're going to do an adjustment note for another satisfied customer. It's our evening shoe. Oops. Which one did we have? I can't remember if it was a 6 or a 4, but I think it's a 6 anyway. So we're going to they're returning one pair for us. Okay, so I'm going to save and close that. And if we now look at our customer, you can see here that we've got an invoice and the adjustment note. Okay, so this adjustment note is a status of unapplied. Good question, Zara. If you delete the last invoice you did, will it recreate that invoice number on the next invoice? No, it won't, because as far as it's concerned, that invoice was created. So you've actually touched on a really good point without me having to, you know, be extremely obvious about it. But if you're deleting invoices, you're actually going to have invoice number gaps, and that may raise some questions. Okay, so we've got our credit note or our adjustment note now. So the next step we want to do is we want to receive payment. So what we can do is in this area here, we've got receive payment, and I can also go to my plus sign and receive payment that way. So 2 different ways of doing it. So let's have a look at this way in our customer section. And what you can see here now is I've got my adjustment note, my credit sitting down the bottom. So my credit is applying itself to that invoice, which is all cool because that's what we wanted it to do. Now remember going back to our company settings way back at the start of our hour when I said under my automation bit here about unticking automatically apply credits. Okay, this is the situation that this applies in. If that was ticked, then I would not see this credit sitting here, and I wouldn't have the option to say, you know, add it to this invoice or don't add it to this invoice, whatever the options are. Okay, so that's where that comes into play. So in this case, yes, I do want to add it to that invoice, and our customer is actually paying me tomorrow, for example, and paying me into my bank account. Okay, so we could say that he only paid me $1,000, so I've only got a partial payment of that invoice. So now if we look there, we can see here that my invoice is only partially paid, so I still got a receive payment option there, and my adjustment note is now closed. Okay, hopefully that's all good on the invoices. So now back to our plus sign. I just want to have a quick chat about the different things under here, because what I find is a lot of businesses tend to probably do more work than they need to. So for example, an invoice is where you it's a 2-step process, okay? You're creating an invoice and you're receiving a payment for that invoice. So an invoice is done when you are providing your customer with terms of credit. So you've basically said to your customer, here you go, you can pay me in 14 days' time. So some of you online today will be in an organisation where you're receiving payment for the goods you've sold then and there on the spot. So you're in a retail environment, or you're selling at a market, or whatever it might be. So a sales receipt is the capture of what was sold, but also of the payment received. Okay, so the payment received went straight to my bank account or into a clearing account or EFT clearing account, whatever it might be. So my sales receipt is a bit of paper that I can give to the customer to say thank you very much for my payment, and you don't owe me anything anymore. So it's a one-step entry. I'm showing what I've sold, to whom I've sold it, and how it was paid for. Okay, so it was paid for cash, and it's gone into my cash paid account, whatever it might be, okay, which can then be banked. Okay, so that's the difference between an invoice and a sales receipt. So do yourself a favour, if you're in a sort of receive now environment, then use sales receipts rather than doing some hard work and invoices and receive payments. A refund receipt is basically when you want to refund against a sales receipt. So it's a cash return, whereas an adjustment note is a credit to a customer and applied to an invoice. Okay, so these all sort of group together, and then these two group together. Okay, moving on. How are we going for time? All right, going to push to our expenses centre. So very similar layout to our customer centre or our sales centre. What we have across here is again a money bar, but the money bar is all about our billing side of things. So if you're in the simple start version, you actually don't have bills, the ability to track payables. It's all on a cash basis entry. So if we go back to our plus sign and we look now at our suppliers list of things, we've got expense. So this is something that we've gone and paid for straight away. So say if we're looking at the same example from our customer list, an expense is the sales receipt of this expense land. Okay, so an expense is where we enter in something like we've paid for, we've gone to and we've filled our car with petrol. Okay, we've paid for that then and there on the spot. I've gone to Officeworks and I've bought, I don't have an account with them, and I've bought, lots of stuff. Okay, so I've handed over my credit card or my debit card and I've walked away with the goods and I've paid for it then and there. Whereas a bill is where the supplier is saying that you can pay me in 30 days' time. Okay, so if I'm in the plumbing industry, my supplier is Reece, and I have an account with Reece, and I get 30 days end of month terms. Okay, so I would enter those as a bill, and I would then be paying all my bills on the statement under pay bills. Okay, so Telstra would be another one. Telstra, you get 16 days or whatever it is, some weird terms. And so if you want to track, your payables, then you could enter in Telstra as a bill as well. Okay, so the difference between those two is one is getting terms of credit, and the other one is you're paying then and there on the spot. So let's have a look at how that actually all looks. So we've got purchase orders. Purchase orders get converted to bills. So if we go back to our, let's go back to our, no, it's not, sorry, it's too late for that. All right, let's do a new purchase order. Okay, so we're going to use my favourite shoe supplier. Okay, Renee. When I want to enter a transaction like a bank fee charged to my account, do I still enter that as a sales receipt? No, Renee. A bank fee is an expense, not income. So the bank fee can be entered via the banking feeds that we'll talk about in the next 10 minutes. So definitely in the case of your question, a bank fee has nothing to do with sales receipt because it is an expense. All right. All righty. Okay, purchase orders. Now remember under our settings, now you probably don't remember because I don't think I actually pointed out. So this is where this company settings gets really important to understand all the bits and pieces. Okay, back to our automation. This is a really interesting one. Pre-filled forms with previously entered content. So this is ticked because it is actually quite helpful, but it's also can be a bit of a thorn. So typically I leave this one ticked unless it's become such a burden that we need to untick it. And I'll show you, one reason why it could be a burden. Okay, so I've just opened a brand new purchase order and I haven't entered anything yet, but I have this line sitting under here of my item details of the product that I have previously purchased from my favourite shoe supplier. And so I haven't entered this, but this is QuickBooks' way of being helpful by pre-filling my form with previously entered content. Now, it can be useful. It can also be a bit of a pain. So depending on what you need to be doing in your file and how you sort of want to work, then you probably want to, be aware of this one and choose your tick selection accordingly. So I know that this has been pulled through, so I can just trash that line and I can start from scratch. Okay, so it's as simple as that. But if you've got a purchase order with a lot of items, we've got lots of abilities to add lots of lines here, it's very easy to overlook what should and shouldn't be there. Okay, so in that sort of case, it's probably a good idea to have that one unticked. But purchase orders is not every business's need anyway. So, I'm not going to say tick it or untick it because it really is up to your individual user circumstance. So what I do want to point out here, though, is if you are doing stock or you've got particular non-inventory items that you want to track by the actual product item itself, then you do need to enter those things underneath the item details. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to say I'm going to order in some 6-inch stilettos, and I want 10 of those, and I want some sneakers. No, I don't have sneakers. What have I got? Runner? There you go, I've got runners. And I want to order in 5. Oh, there you go. I'm low, so I'm actually going to order in 10 of those as well. Okay, so here's my purchase order that I'm now going to send to my supplier. So I'm going to save that one. And then I can email that off. I don't have an email address, but I can save and send. In this case, I'm just going to close it down. You can see here now that I've saved it, I've got the ability to copy that to a bill. Okay, so now in my money bar, I've got my purchase order and I can open it up again, and I can also create a bill from here and the plus sign as well. So I can create a bill. So in this case, I'm going to say, not pay bills, create bill. In this case, I'm going to say, let's use this one here because I want to show you that magic drawer that pops open again. So if I type in my favorite shoe supplier, there's my purchase order, and again you can see that this is a bit of a problem because it's also pre-populated the other bits. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. So I'm going to close that one without saving, and I'm going to actually create bill from my purchase order itself. And it's done the same thing. I actually was testing that. I forgot that it does that. So, okay, we have to trash our lines and then add that in. So in this organisation, if I was in a business like this, I would actually have that setting unticked because that would actually, drive you nuts. Okay, so I've pulled through my purchase order, and you can also see here I've got a line here for freight because when I get my delivery, not only have I received my goods, but my invoice has another line for freight. So when I create the purchase order, I don't know that I'm going to get charged or what I'm going to get charged for freight, so I don't put that on a purchase order because it's not necessary. But when I get my bill, I do need to add that freight line in, so it goes against my expense for freight. Okay, so my expense is from my chart of accounts, and I've just added in that freight component. So I'm going to save that one. And again, I've got my more button here down the bottom and the similar options, copy, delete, those sort of things. So the same thing applies with our deleting, okay? Be very cautious. And this, then also we talked about is our, we're talking about, an adjustment note from the customer side. We've got supplier credit on this side. Okay, so in this case, 5 of my runners, so my favourite shoe supplier, 5 of my runners were damaged. Oops. In this case, not jogger, it was my runner. So I'm going to ask for I've been given a refund on 5 of those. So I'm going to save and close that. And what I can do now is I can make a bill payment. Okay, my favourite shoe supplier, and it's applied that credit in there because I've gone through the pay bills area. If I'd gone through my supplier area of my favourite shoe supplier, okay, I could click on make payment here, and there you can see my credit applied there, much the same as we did with our customer. So more than one way to do a particular action here. You need to find the best way to do things for yourself. Okay, so whether that means working in the customer centres, okay, as opposed to using the plus sign, it really depends on the way that you want to actually work to make things work for you better. Okay, all right, so let's apply that credit. We're paying that in full from my bank account, and it's done. So if we now look at my last pays, there it is there, my favourite shoe supplier in my green column there. Okay, we have another question. When I want to enter a transaction, oh no, we've still got that. Okay, I've answered that one. All right, no more new questions. Cool. Moving on. So let's go to the banking area. So the banking is, to me, is probably one of the most critical things to get a really good grasp of. So as I said earlier, these particular transactions I've uploaded as opposed to connecting up my real bank accounts. So, yeah, it makes no difference really into what I'm going to demonstrate. Okay, so let's have a bit of a talk about what we're looking at here. So if I go back to my dashboard, when I click into a company file, what I want to look at is this area here, my bank accounts. What I can see here is these numbers, 71 to review, 19 to review. What that means is that there's transactions sitting here that need my attention. And this is really important because we want to have a green tick here, because a green tick means that all of my transactions have been actioned, and that's really good for my business, because then I've got a good capture of what's happening in my business. So I can access the banking centre by either clicking in here or clicking on the banking centre on the left-hand side. Either way will get you straight into what we're about to look at now. You'll see 2 tabs across the top, banking, which is what the screen we're looking at, and also bank rules. And we're going to talk about bank rules right now as well. You can see all the different accounts that have been connected. So in this case, I've got a bank account and I've got a credit card. If you've got multiple accounts, these can spread across the top here, and you can also toggle between the ones by your drop down here as well. So what we've got next is we've got 3 tabs here, for review, in QuickBooks, and excluded. So the for review tab is all the transactions that have been pushed through from my bank, and these need my attention now. So QuickBooks is going to help me code these, but otherwise I need to make some business decisions as to about where I've spent my money on. So this is why it's called for review. Once I've reviewed them, then they move from for review and into QuickBooks. And it's only when they're in the in QuickBooks tab that they have an impact on the reports in my file. So while they're sitting here in status for review, they do not affect my profit and loss. They don't generate income for me. They don't affect my expenses because they're in a review state only. It's only once I've actioned these and moved them into in QuickBooks that they have an impact on my reports. This excluded tab is a good one as well. So you might recall at the beginning we touched on that if I've imported or if I've opened up, connected up a bank account and I've brought through transactions that I don't want, I can actually get rid of them. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's have a look at these other columns across here. So you can see here that each of these, when I hover over them, have a little arrow, which means that I can sort by these columns. Okay, so I can sort by spent. It's going to put them in order of value, you know, biggest to smallest. I can sort by description, so I can group things together, and I can sort by date as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go oldest to newest. Before it was newest to oldest. Okay, so sorting by the columns is really helpful as well. So in this case here, I've got transactions from December all the way through to April. I don't want those December ones because my December period has already been done. So when I imported in my transactions, I imported too much. So I'm going to remove all of my December figures or December transactions in the pending, in the for review state. So I've just ticked them all, and under batch action, what I can say is exclude all of those transactions. Okay, so I've just got rid of 17 transactions in one lump, and they're now sitting under excluded. If I've excluded something and it's actually incorrect that I've excluded them, I can undo. I can, by undoing, it's going to put it back into my for review tab. Okay, so excluding is not the end of the world either. So now I've got these transactions from this quarter that need to be addressed. So we've got all sorts of different things happening here. So I'd suggest, because I've got so many, that I'm going to sort now by description. If you're actioning this area regularly, then you probably just code as you go. So what I want to show you now is how we can code things to make life easy for you. So by sorting by description, QuickBooks has now lumped all our groups, all our things from the same supplier together. So this description here, if I click on one to open it up, has come from my description that appears on my bank statement. So what happens now is QuickBooks is offering an option or a suggestion as to what this purchase could be. And this suggestion is shown in green because it is pretty accurate, because I've used this file before as demonstration and I've coded 711 to fuel. QuickBooks has learnt that this transaction is a fuel expense. So its suggestion is in green, indicating that it's a pretty reasonable, if not fully accurate, suggestion. So if I'm happy with QuickBooks' suggestion that this purchase is fuel, then I could quite simply just click on Add. Okay, so that's now popped it in. And if we go to the In QuickBooks tab, you can see it there. Now, individually adding is a bit tedious, so I could, bulk tick several and accept selected. Before we did exclude, in this case, we're going to accept. So I've just popped 3 more in there, so we should now see 4 transactions in our QuickBooks. Okay, so we'll get back to our rules or our suggestions in a moment. So as we scroll down, you can see here that there's some other things here that have got green. So Battery World is a motor vehicle repair and maintenance. Quite a reasonable suggestion. Then we've got all these things here that are uncategorized expense. This is QuickBooks saying, I've got no idea what this is, and you need to help me, because the last thing we want to see is these uncategorized expenses being accepted as uncategorized, because your bookkeeper or your accountant is going to jump up and down and basically get you to recode these. So uncategorized is QuickBooks' way of saying, I need your help, because once we code this, so say for example we've got auto glass, so we're going to change uncategorized to motor vehicle repair and maintenance. when we make a change like that, QuickBooks comes up with what I call a soft rule. Okay, so what it's saying is this descriptor here of auto glass, every time we see auto glass from now on, we're going to code it to motor vehicle repairs and maintenance. So that's a soft rule. If we say add to that, next time auto glass comes up in our bank feed, it's going to be a green suggestion for motor vehicle repairs and maintenance. So the green is what I call QuickBooks' way of doing a soft rule. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to click on add. Okay, so let's have a look here. We've got bearings in industry here. So this is uncategorized. So QuickBooks is saying, okay, I don't know what that is. I know that this is actually a consumable. I don't know if we got that. No. We've got materials in this file. Yep, okay. So just watch. We've got another bearings down there. Okay, now just watch what happens to this one when I change this, the top one to materials. Okay, it's also changed the second one. Okay, so I don't need to change that one anymore. And we will set bearings to materials from now on. Again, this is another soft rule suggestion. So if I say add to this one, this second one should turn green because that soft rule is kicking into action. Okay, there you go. All right, so this is how quickly QuickBooks is learning. Is that category the same as the account in the chart of accounts? Yes, that is exactly right, Zara. Okay, this is the category, which is the chart of accounts, links back to the chart of accounts. Okay, so you can see how those soft rules are created. So your task is to make sure that there's nothing uncategorized. Now, that all gets really tedious, doing it all manually like this. I mean, it works well in individual sort of things, but when we get lots of stuff like fuel being purchased at once, we want to actually create what I call some hard rules. Okay, so these green soft rules are QuickBooks' way of saying, you know, pretty darn confident that that's what you want to code it to, so we're going to help you along the way. And if you're happy with that, just add me in. So we can go sit here and go add. Or let's create a rule. So up in the top corner, we've got bank rules. And we're going to add a new rule on the top right-hand corner. So we're going to call this rule fuel. I'm not going to call it 7-Eleven because I don't care where the fuel is bought from. It can be bought from anywhere. So it's still fuel whether it's bought at 7-Eleven or whether it's bought at United or BP or whatever it is. So in this case, our rule name is fuel and our rule applies to money out. Okay, we've got the option of money in, money out. We can also say which bank accounts does this rule apply to? Does it apply only to my bank account, or does it apply only to my credit card, or does it apply to all my accounts? In this case, it applies to all my accounts. So a hard rule is where we say when a particular set of conditions are met, I want QuickBooks to apply the following actions each and every time. So in this case, I want the expense to be entered against my fuel supplier, coded to my expense account fuel with a GST code on it applied. And I'm going to save that rule. So if we go back to our banking button, what we should see here now is our 7-Eleven has got rule applied to it. So if I click on that, you can see here it says rule applied. Okay, so I can, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make some edits to this rule. So we've also got other places where our fuel has been purchased from. We've got it from AA Officer. We've got it from, where else? SW Plus and United. Okay, so let's edit this rule so that it picks up other places we buy fuel from. So I'm going to add lines. So I'm going to say United. I'm going to say SW Plus, and AA was the last one. So what we want to make sure when we're doing a rule like this is that we say when a transaction meets any of these conditions, because it's very unlikely to meet all of those conditions. So what we're saying now is I've bought it from 7-Eleven, or I've bought it from United, or I've bought it from SW, or I've bought it from AA. I can add up to 5 lines. Okay, so I can add 5 different conditions in one rule. So let's save that rule, and let's see what's happened in our banking area now. Oh, look at that. Okay, so these rules, let me sort by category here. Oh, that's annoying. It's supposed to group them all together. But anyway, okay, so we've got all our stuff highlighted there. It's actually easier to sort it by description. And what we can do is we can say, okay, well, let's push a few of those through and batch action accept. Okay, so that rule, that hard rule now, has helped me considerably, because I know that when I have a hard rule in place, I really don't need to review those transactions. If my rule is working, then I need to. Then I'm pretty confident in accepting that rule application. So I can take it one step further now. I know my rule works well. So when I'm very confident that a rule works well, I have one more thing up my sleeve, and down the bottom left-hand corner here, I can click on automatically add to my books. So that rule now will apply without me having to do something. So if I click save, what we should see is our remaining transactions. There you go, 11 transactions have been added to my books. So if I go back to my banking, I don't have any more fuel anywhere left. Okay, and if I look in QuickBooks, there are my fuel, or my fuel. So I've got different things I can see here. My blank ones here are the ones that we added in from the soft rule. My rule ones are the ones that we added in manually from our rule. And this one here with the plus is the automated entry. So it's very easy to tell how these were actually added into the file. Okay, so let's just have another bit more of a look at our rules and see what other things we can do. So we talked about money out, money in. So we can do rules that are applying to those. We've also got different options here with regard to the text. So we've got bank text and amount. So I like using bank text as opposed to description, because it seems to pick up the description properly. So let me just open up the Banking Center on a second tab, because I just want to show you something else. Okay, so the bank text we want to select when we're creating a rule, let's say Battery World. Okay, so we've got all of this description here. This has all come through in our bank statement. All of it's not relevant when we're creating a rule. What is relevant is Battery World. The Dandenong, so Vic, so it's Dandenong, South Victoria. This one here, that's not relevant to our rule, because Battery World is a franchise and it's everywhere. So I could buy a battery from Sydney, really, and I want my rule to apply. So I'm only going to make the rule relevant to the relevant bits of my description. So another example would be, or Bunnings, for example. Okay, so this is a classic. This is probably all Cranbourne, but Bunnings is all around the country. So all I want to do is pick up the Bunnings descriptor. Okay, so I don't want to, pull in that whole lot there. So if we go back to our rule, so that's what our bank text is. We can also do doesn't contain and is exactly. So depending on what configuration you want to do, then it works really well. So for example, I'll give you an example of when you use these different bits. So I'm going to create a rule for BP fuel. And you'll see why I'm doing it separately. So it contains BP, but doesn't contain BPay. Okay, so if we only had the rule to say contains BP, then potentially what will happen is that any BPay purchase I've made will go through as fuel because it's picking up the BP letters in BPay. So we could use the is exactly, and that would probably work as well. But I just want to show you, you know, how you do a doesn't contain bit as well. Okay, so let's just trash those 2 lines. All right. The other thing we can see here is, if we add a line, is we've also got the option of amount. So we could say equals, is greater than, or whatever it might be. So we can say contains Officeworks and is less than $80. Then we want to code it to office expense and be done with that way. So then if anything is purchased from Officeworks greater than $80, then we're, you know, we're going to have to manually look at it. We've also got the option of changing things to be a transfer. So an example of that might be my payroll. Okay, so my payroll I want to set up as a transfer directly to my payroll clearing account. Going back to expense, so then we can also say, okay, I want my expense to be split. So for example, we've got not AGL, I won't put a pay in for the minute, but say for example, we've got our electricity and we've got a home office, and our accountant has said we're allowed to home office split. Okay, so I'm going to say 20% of my electricity bill is going to electricity, and 80% of my bill then goes to my drawings account, my personal account. Okay, so it's nice and easy to split. So I think we'll just add that supplier in. So we've got added AGL, and so I'm just saving a new supplier directly, as easy as that. Okay, so that's how you can split things down. You can also split things by dollar amount. All right, so that gives you an idea of the different rule applications. So going back to my banking, we've talked at length about creating rules, about soft rules, hard rules, the importance of categorizing. You know, definitely don't leave things as uncategorized. What have we got here now? I just had a credit in my account, which was a GST refund from ATO. What category and account would I put that to? BAS suspense, you would put it to. Okay, so then your accountant can deal with it unless you're dealing with a bookkeeper. But yeah, BAS suspense will do. Easy to find then. Okay, so let's we talked about the rules. Now let's talk about the other thing that QuickBooks does, which is matching. So let me sort by category or match. Okay, so what we've got now is we've got some expenses that are being paid for, some bills, and some invoices where we've received money into our account. So the next sort of thing to talk about is how QuickBooks handles what we call a match. So we've talked about an add, and now we're going to do a match. So an add is where QuickBooks is recognizing invoices, invoice payments, bills, and bill payments. So if you remember up here, under our plus sign, we've got invoices and receive payment. So the second step of an invoice is where we receive the payment against that invoice. And we've also got bill and pay bills, so our second step of that. So I'm going to show you how QuickBooks handles that. So let's have a look at this bottom Telstra entry here. So this is QuickBooks has recognised in our bank feed that a bill payment has been actioned for Telstra. So it's noticing the words Telstra, it's noticing our dollar value, and it's saying that's a pretty darn good match to this bill payment. Are you happy with me to recognise that as the bill payment and match it off in my banking feed? And I am. So I just click on match and that's gone. This other bill payment here, or sorry, this other match is QuickBooks recognising that there is an unpaid bill for Telstra in QuickBooks, and it's saying there's an open balance, there's a bill open here for Telstra. It's recognising again the bank detail and the dollar value, And so it's saying, I think that this is a match for this unpaid bill. So in other words, if you go to our plus sign, this pay bills function hasn't been done. But that doesn't matter because QuickBooks is recognising that this bill is the one that has been paid. So if we say, yes, you're right, and we click match now, if we go to our magnifying glass, you can see here our transaction that's just been actioned. Here's our bill. And now because we've accepted that match in our bank feed, QuickBooks has processed the bill payment for us. Okay, so with same thing now with our invoices. Here's an invoice payment. So if we think about that in our plus sign, we've received payment for an invoice. So QuickBooks is recognising another satisfied customer for invoice 2243. The payment has been processed and it's recognising that it's a match. So are we happy with that? Yes, we are. And then we have another invoice here that is not yet paid. So in other words, we have yet to receive the payment, but QuickBooks is going to do that for us. So it's saying, here's my customer name. My customer loves me. It's invoice 2123. It's matching that to our invoice 2123 and the dollar values all match up. Therefore, I'm happy that that is a correct match. Click on match. And if we look at our recent transactions, there's our invoice payment. Okay, so QuickBooks has once again actioned that process for me. Okay, so the next step after that is what we actually want to aim for here is to get rid of all of this. We want to make sure we've reviewed everything in here. So we've got a green tick, so all our transactions are reviewed. So on the assumption that all of our transactions have been reviewed, then we should be able to do what we call a final step, which is a reconciliation. So a reconciliation is where we finalise the transactions. We actually process in QuickBooks to say that what we have in QuickBooks matches what's in our bank account. So the two are equal. So what we do is we go into our reconcile screen. So reconcile is under our accounting center. It's the second tab across from our screen. We could also use our gear icon and click on reconcile there. It takes us to the same screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconcile my uploaded bank account. And in order to do that, I just want to get an end balance here. So just bear with me. What have we got? 794232. Let me write that down before I forget. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go to our chart of accounts and click on reconcile. And it's my uploaded bank. My ending balance, according to my statement that I would have in my hand or on my screen, is this amount here. And that was of, let's say today, and we click on start reconciling. And what we ignore that that last one there, because I should have actually gone to the balance here. But what we see from the because we've processed these through from our bank feed, is QuickBooks has automatically ticked those off. So these are my pushed through transactions, and this is a manually added transaction. It's actually incorrect. So if I actually want to look at this balance here, 271732. I'm going to edit my info, 2717.32. And my date is actually going to be the end of March. Okay. All right, there we go. So what we see now is my banking, my bank feed or my bank transactions that I process through my banking area has now helped me do my reconciliation. So if I've got a green tick, all my transactions are processed, then what we should see is the bank account balances matches to our bank account in QuickBooks, and our reconciliation based on our bank statement information, being our end balance and our end date, should equal, and we should get a zero difference. If you don't have a zero difference, then there's actually an issue, and you would need to address that issue. Okay, so much like that rogue transaction that was sitting there that doesn't belong, it belongs to the other different account, that's where I'm going to have to fix it up and push it to, then that's what you do. So you're aiming for a zero difference here based on the bank transactions from your bank account. So we've got another question here. How do you enter a recurring bill like Telstra, car payment, etc.? Okay, so let me just go back to our dashboard. Actually, sorry, I'm just going to fix up that entry. So, yeah, that's okay. All right, so a question here, how do I enter a recurring bill? Okay, or something like that. So under our your gear icon, you've got recurring transactions. So this is in the essentials or plus only, not in simple start. So you could enter in a recurring transaction from scratch here. You'd click on new, and then you could say bill, and then go ahead and enter that bill. So again, you'd create it for Telstra, for example. So you'd say Telstra, payee being Telstra. So it might be a Telstra monthly, if you're on a fixed plan, whatever it might be. So you say it's going to be monthly on the 7th day of every month, starting from the 7th of May. Okay, then I've got an option. It's a fixed plan for 12 months, so I want it to stop after 12 occurrences. So then you'd fill in the details, being telephone, internet, $120, $129, yada yada yada. Okay, inclusive, exclusive. Be careful of that one. Okay, so that's how you can set up your recurring template for a bill like that, for example. A car payment, similar sort of thing. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties of that because I'll do the bookkeeping way as opposed to the small business way. So, we do things a bit more particularly. But anyway, so yes, recurring transactions, lots of different options here that you can do for your recurring transactions as well. Also, if you want to, so say I'm just going to add that bill in. I'm just going to use that, just for example, make that date the start of the month. Okay, just let me save that. Just ignore that one was created from the recurring template. You'll also see down the bottom here, make recurring. Okay, so if I click on that bill, or any transaction and the make recurring, it will take me into the recurring transactions area, which will then allow you to create a schedule from that. Okay, one thing I want to show you, which I haven't covered off, it's quite important too, is the ability to add attachments. So just got a blank invoice up down the bottom of the screen, and you'll see this attachments on all transactions. Is the ability to add in here we go, some sort of file. Okay, so depending on what sort of business you're in, you might want to add some stuff to your invoices, which you then can attach to the email and send out to your customer. Okay, so this might be your terms and conditions that you want to send out with your invoice. You might also want to use this attachments area to store bits and pieces. So say, for example, I noticed at the beginning, one of our people on board is a photographer, and not probably the right place to do it, but you might want to add some images in here or whatever, and store it against the customer as opposed to send it to the customer. So this attachments area becomes an archive sort of area. So you might want to, attach timesheets to it, or anything that sort of helps you understand how you build that customer. Conversely, the bills, for example, or an expense, you can attach the receipt to that. Okay, so under attachments, you can attach a receipt. You might attach a delivery docket, those sort of things. So do pay attention to that area as well. Okay, so reports very quickly, and while we're sort of quickly looking at reports, also wanted to quickly bring up the iPad if we got time for that. How are we going for time? All right, pushing. So reports is pretty straightforward, lots of different reports depending on what you want to achieve or what you want to look at, and of course depending on what version you're on, there'll be the different number of reports available as well. So definitely, you know, have a good look at the report section. The favourites ones here are critical. You want to make sure that you've got, you know, that you're looking at your profit and loss report, that you know, checking your income and checking your expenses, checking your profitability, all those sort of things as well. This will help you understand if you're actually entering things incorrectly, but more importantly, help you understand your business. So the balance sheet is also important. The balance sheet is about your net worth. Okay, so it captures who you owe, what you own, and then your balance as to, you know, how profitable or how worthy is the business you're running. Okay, and never underestimate the power of this one here, the accounts receivable. This is all about who owes you. Okay, if I ran across a business that actually had receivables that looked like this, I'd be asking some serious questions. You know, why do you have so many of your invoices over half the value of what people owe you over 90 days? Okay, that's a really bad business. It means your cash flow is really poor. So, you know, there's some serious debt collection required here. So always keep a good eye on who owes you and chase your money. Okay, that's how your business thrives. Okay, what do we have? Do I still need to keep receipts from expenses if I've uploaded them as an attachment? Actually, you don't. If you've got a digital copy of that invoice attached, then that is sufficient for tax purposes. So that is it is actually allowed as a digital copy. Yeah, so you don't need to keep those. So think about those receipts that fade and all those sort of stuff. It's really it's a great one. So you can actually, you know, upload them, and then you don't have to worry about them. You can actually PIF them. So I actually use a what do we call it? A processing app. So say I buy fuel, I've actually you know, I take a photo of it through the app, and then it's I just throw the receipt into the bin, and then my office manager processes my receipts through the app. So yeah, I'm a good one for throwing away that. Now, what I've got on the screen, I've just flicked screens, is the app on my tablet, on my iPhone, what do you call it? iPad. So if you don't have the app installed on your phone or tablet, then go into your app store and do search QuickBooks Online and install it, because it's really cool. So what you can see on the screen here very nicely is on the right-hand side there under activity, these are the things we've just done. So remember, we did a quote and we did an invoice, and you know, all sorts of stuff. So we can see bits and pieces that we've done. We've also got some nice graphs on you know, what's our profitability. So even though my cash flow is really bad, you can see there I'm still profitable. So doing something right, don't know quite not, but that's the case. And we've also similar configuration. Remember, I've been harping on this plus sign. So plus sign being add. Okay, so we can add stuff here. We can add a customer. We can add a quote. We can add an expense. So I'm going to show you how to add an expense now. So is it going to come up? Thought I clicked on that expense. Here we go. This is where you get to go seasick when I take a photo. So sort of further on from your question there, Rennie, yes, you could attach it, but you could also use the app and you can take a photo and line it up. And then we can snap it. Okay, you get to look at my office now. Ah, come on. It's thinking. All right, this is where we have the musical intervention. All right, here we go. Beautiful. All right, so it says we have to use this photo. Yes, we are. So now it takes us to another screen where we can actually enter this in as an expense. So what we're looking at now is, you know, how much was it? So I bought some fuel. So this is one time I didn't throw away the receipt, so I can use it for here. I paid for it with my credit card. My credit card. Who did I pay? I paid for fuel. What did I pay for? I paid for fuel. What code? Tax code? I purchased something, so it's got GST on it, and I can see that on my tax invoice. And that's all I want to do. So now I click on save. And so when we go back to our next screen, or back to our computer screen, I can show you what that's all about. I mean, when I manually add fuel expense, like you just showed. Yeah, same thing, Rennie, exactly the same. Oh, will that match to the bank statement when I import the statement? Yes, it will. So what we're processing here is the expense entry for $63.52. So if that was to my bank or credit card that I've got linked to my bank feeds, it will match. And this is taking an awful long time to save. It doesn't normally take that long. So I'm just going to let that one sort of sit there. I'm going to flick back to my other screen for you. And hopefully by the time it's done that, I have to check to see whether I'm on data or Wi-Fi. I don't know, it's taking a long time. So what we should see, and since it hasn't even saved yet, I can't show you, but if we were to look here at our recent transactions, our expense should pop up. So that's really tedious. Okay, so what is it, 7 o'clock now? Okay, it's still saving, which is really quite extraordinary. But what I wanted to show you was the actual attachment, how it was in there. But anyway, I can't. I don't know why it's taking that long. It doesn't normally take that long. So it is 7 o'clock. We've covered off on bits. I do encourage you to do the apps, the App Store, and download the app onto your tablet or whatever. Don't let my long-winded saving process deter you from that, because it doesn't normally do that. I've probably got an update that I need to install or something. But otherwise, you know, you can do quotes. You can, if you're out on the road and you're into quoting, throw away your manual book, get your tablet out, do a professional-looking quote then and there on the spot, and I'm sure you'll get a lot more conversions of your sales. And then straight away, when the client you know, sees that and is really happy with it, you can convert that invoice straight away to that quote straight away to an invoice as well. Okay. Okay. So Rennie, you've said thank you, appreciated that. If I have more questions as I get started, where can I ask? Okay, so on my screen, let me just bring up intuit.com.au again. Under small business, you've got find an advisor. Okay, so this is where you would probably start. You can search for different advisors, you know, people that are professionals that experience was, you know, with QuickBooks. So that's pretty much where you can start. Otherwise, there's lots of self-help stuff as well. Also on your QuickBooks itself, you've got the little question there. So you can type a question in, or you can contact directly for support that way, which takes you to the chat box, and there is also a phone number that you can do there as well. So depending on what you need, obviously the Intuit support is free. If you go down the route of an advisor, then I'm sure that will be a charged service. Okay, so it depends on your budget, and it also depends on your level of expertise that you think is required. You've got to remember that the Intuit support staff are not necessarily fully trained in accounting and bookkeeping principles. All right, any other questions? We've just gone 7 o'clock. That was really fun, and so much more fun when people engage with lots of questions. It does get a bit sort of tedious sometimes when I'm talking to myself. Jana, no problem at all. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You look, if you've got other questions that are burning and you just need to get off your chest, then feel free to post those now. Otherwise, I'm going to say good night to you all.